Before we start the panel, I think you all have had lunch by now, and I think you could use some exercises. So can you please stand up for a while? For a second. I promise you can sit down soon. I have a couple of questions to ask you, actually. So can you please sit down in case you are moving from home to work daily by walking or by bicycle? You can sit down if you are moving to work by walking or by bicycle. Great. Please sit down in case you use public transportation. Okay, we have some car fans maybe, but still, please sit down if you use any other transport mode except private car. Okay. Please sit down in case you think that in 10 years from now, you will not be using private car as your main mobility mode. Okay, we can see that we are in an innovation festival. And thank you, the rest, you can also sit. So we can see that there is still some work to do for the mobility sector. And actually, we have great experts to open it to us a bit. At first, I would like to start with Indrek. We are in a country which is in 5th position of owning a private car, actually. And at the same time, we have free public transportation here in Estonia. So what's the government plan for supporting the move towards private cars to alternative modes?
Yeah, best question ever. Also being asked in every event. But if you look at the cities right now, like Tallinn, Tartu, I don't know, Pärnu, it's already happening in the centers. The public transport there is, let's say, good. There are different services like Bolt, rental cars, electric bikes, scooters, you name it. And this is the thing that turns this development around. So in the city centers already it's happening. The private cars are, let's say, the owning is decreasing. The people who live there, they have opportunity not to own the car, to use it. And if go to the, let's say, summer camp, they rent car and the need is there. If we look at, let's say, from the government side to the whole Estonia, then our mission is to cover the country with big lines, where are big demands like train, with buses in rural areas and so on. But yes, in the rural areas there are some, let's say, exercises of effectiveness.
Okay.
Which are to be challenged to let's say, unpack. And I think there are more, let's say, experience from Pirko's side to.
Okay, Pirko, you have done some pilots in rural areas. So is it possible for private sector really to find a business case in sparsely populated areas? Or do we just have to accept it that private car in countryside is mandatory?
Let me start with saying that probably the free transport is the biggest mistake ever Estonia has made in innovating the mobility. Because even so that we have 30 years having a market economy, there are me and the older generations remember how the planning economy and so-called free things are working. More, actually, if we talk about innovation, more we have private sector helping public sector to execute innovation, more it happens. So more we have a competition, market-driven services, the better it is. Of course, as Indrek said, in city center it is quite easy to do. But on rural areas, it's more difficult. But nowadays, where actually we have more data, we have quite good connectivity. That means we can build much more effective services also which can provide quite good mobility level also in rural areas. So I think what we are doing as a demand-responsive transport for last, let's say, miles, then this is one option to optimize and give the accessibility of good transport also the areas where you cannot build a tram station or a train station or where you can have a bus leaving in every hour.
Taavi, do you agree that free public transportation can be a showstopper for innovation?
Of course it is, and there are no such things as free things. They are paid by the taxpayers anyways, but it kills the innovation. I very much agree with Pirko. Actually, I liked it very much to see that so many of you actually choose walking or bicycling. I think this is clearly above the Estonian average and certainly above the global average, especially when you go to bigger cities. This probably also shows that Tartu is quite walkable or like easy to access city, but the picture would be much worse if you go to places like San Francisco, for example. People are commuting hours, and this is not sustainable. Also, if you look at the people coming here yesterday, today from Tallinn, too many of them came by personal cars, me including. Actually, I considered train, but the trains had only like a couple of seats left, so I was not even certain that I can get a sitting place there. But having said that, of course, train would be much more effective, and then in Tartu it's not such a big problem to get from the train station to here as well. Actually, I remember there was a very serious discussion when I still went to university in Tartu. There was a very serious discussion whether the train station should be closer to city center. And the final result was that, okay, let's keep it close to the railway, not to the city center, because the railway is not so close to the city center. Anyways, point being is that there are much more effective transport means than personal cars, and I am absolutely convinced that we are moving in this direction.
Estonia has been one of the first countries to legalize testing of autonomous vehicles, ride-hailing, courier robots on the streets. Recently, we were the first country to issue a license to unmanned semi-autonomous vehicles. What do you think, Taavi? You have been in both sides, public and private. Is it just a coincidence that it all has happened in Estonia, or maybe you can bring some practical examples?
No, it's definitely not a coincidence, and it has been very cautious decision-making. I mean, ride-hailing or platform economy is a little bit different topic, but it's still relevant because also in that Estonia has been kind of innovator or like trying to keep up with the innovation that private companies are doing. There are too many cities and countries in the world that still say that the only way to drive taxi is if you have little yellow signs and you have this plafond, even though in platform you actually can automize it and do it much more transparently. So there's so many countries that are still against this, can you imagine? Now talking about autonomous driving, the first legalization that I can recall in Estonia was already 5 years ago, and that was basically linked with the emergence of Starship technologies, small delivery robots on crosswalks. Today they are part of our everyday scene, at least in Tallinn, and this legislation has definitely justified.
But why here? Not anywhere else? Like, do we have more flexibility somehow? Or?
No, I wouldn't say that it's not possible to drive autonomously elsewhere as well. I mean, there are many countries that are very forward-looking and a lot of opportunities, and I'm happy that Estonia is one of those countries where you can also, in addition to small delivery robots, you can also drive autonomously with passenger vehicles and actually test the use cases for the future transport. And I think it has been throughout governments a conscious direction, and very rightfully so. I think as a small country, it's our task even to innovate and to keep up with innovation and to be the fast movers. big countries can avoid to be lazy, but we cannot.
Okay. Indrek, your department in the ministry is responsible for the whole development of Estonian mobility, including national big projects in railways and roads. But at the same time, your department was very actively involved in the first pilots. Is it common to be like ministry level involved in this kind of innovations, or why?
Yes, we are the department in the ministry that also says that I think it's possible, let's do it. And the other departments are, let's say, conservative, legislation problems, so on. But our department is in the ministry, the driver who just, if the private sector comes, wants to enable some kind of service, we are, of course, we are looking into it. We like to support with the legislation, and then we go to the departments that is dealing with the legislation. Then we, let's say, there will be some times that they say no. Then we come back, say, what if this, what if that? Then we try to find out the let's say, the loopholes in the laws, and to make the laws flexible to allow the new innovative, let's say, transport services or whatever services they are to bloom up.
So you're basically finding ways how can, instead of finding ways how cannot.
Yes.
So that's the difference. Yeah. Pirko, we are in a startup festival and talking about government sector. Aren't they in like different rooms even? Or is it really possible to collaborate?
Luckily no, because I think even biggest startup deals are in Estonia in history were made first with the help of the government. I know one VC sitting there and who was able, with the help of Taavi, to get the introduction to Rakuten and to sell one of his first portfolio companies to Japanese big investors. So the role of the government in helping startups is very important. But I think in Estonia, if you would ask that what is different, is I think we have a kind of different culture. Even we are in Tartu, we don't recall, but the mobile parking was introduced in Tartu, I think, in late 90s. And it has been here already a quarter of the century. And this is still something what you consider innovation maybe in other regions. But it happens, I don't know why, I think it is somehow in Estonia, public sector, they believe that they can enable innovation and they don't always say no. I remember also when the discussion about how the autonomous vehicles could let on the streets, we found that, okay, but actually we have a legislation saying a wording that we can start testing without changing any law. And there was only government to take the position that, okay, let's help them. And the same, I think, was with a Bolt and so on. And even if we talk with the municipalities, I see quite a lot of excitement also on public servants, also in municipalities to make pilots, to test, to learn. Okay. Tartu is exemplary, a very good example on that. But there are other municipalities too where we can do pilots. We did it in Saaremaa and it worked out.
Taavi, we have been talking and we have been like piloting autonomous vehicles already for 5 to 6 years. So isn't it time to start implementing or scaling now? Like, how long do we have to pilot?
Well, first of all, the first time I took a ride in an autonomous vehicle in Silicon Valley was 2014. So it's even more. It was a Google car, or actually a Lexus that had the lidars on it, and it needed to have 2 safety operators to be able to drive legally in public traffic, 2014. Now, if you ask me, when will it be possible to drive from here to my home in Tallinn autonomously, I will tell you that for the next 10 years it will not happen, absolutely, certainly, for many reasons. If you ask me from here to Annelinn or some other side of Tartu, I'm also rather skeptical. It might be possible in Estonia, but in many countries it won't go mainstream. If you ask me about last mile and areas where the traffic is not very bad, I think it will be mainstream in a couple of years. And already now, we have seen in Estonia, in Tartu, in Tallinn, we have seen in, our company has been in 11 countries, so far only Europe, but we know that, of course, Singapore and Japan and some other countries are also very forward-looking. So I'm very optimistic regarding last mile. Also, I'm very optimistic regarding parcel delivery. I think we need to keep in mind that in addition to the technology, which already, in my opinion, is, or not, it's not matter of my opinion, but in many use cases, it's already better driver than human being. So that's one thing. But the other thing is regulation. And I have to say that regulation in this, in a way, needs to be tough, because otherwise you have some dodgy players claiming that they are doing autonomous driving, and that won't be safe. But even if the politicians want to allow, they are probably afraid of allowing very fast driving cars to the traffic anytime soon. And so probably rightfully so.
So we won't have level 5 fully autonomous private vehicles in 10 years? Okay,
definitely but last mile, which is taking you from the train station to the city center, absolutely, definitely.
Okay.
And that's already today doable. The question is how quickly it will scale, how quickly it will be commercially viable, and the saving doesn't need to come from the autonomous vehicle. The saving will come from the fact that you take train from Tallinn or Riga or Warsaw to Tartu, and there is the saving. You don't need to drive on a personal vehicle to come.
Okay. But when we talk about mobility in 10 years, there were really optimistic people who were ready to give up their car. So what can we give them instead of it, Pirko, in 10 years?
No, I think there is, I start from the point that I think what government can do is to let more and more private sector to come up with new solutions. And I think Bolt electric scooter or micro-mobility is also a future of part of public transport. Fast ride or fast rental cars are actually also part of shared or public transport. So if we look at in a wider context and we start to think that how we organize the services and marketplace in a way that there are low barriers, the regulation is reasonable, there is room for innovation, it will happen. And if you look, when I came here also by a Bolt scooter today, it's the fastest way to travel. I saw at least 40, 50 scooters next to mine, so I think this kind of innovations are happening. And in Tallinn, I don't know how many rapid rental cars or fast rental cars there are, but I can think there are thousands of them already.
Okay. Indrek, what will we give to these people in 10 years?
Definitely, we hope that the private sector will interfere, let's say, to the public sector market more intensely. It's happening now, and it will be bigger part of the private sector in 10 years. Maybe if we look at the aviation side, then the drones could be one real thing that could work in 10 years. The package delivery, maybe even people, because we are already, let's say, making test beds for the let's say sandboxes for the entrepreneurs in the airport of Tartu, working on the legislation for the autonomous air vehicles in Tallinn. So by 2024, we hope we will be ready, and aviation, let's say, kuidas see lennujuhtimiskeskus on?
Aviation management?
Flight management center.
Flight management center in Tallinn will be capable in 2024 to organize this autonomous flights with drones. So we are hoping that this sector will also come alive very quickly.
Especially to remote islands, for example, to keep some very quick communication.
Yeah.
But from government side, I think one thing is a good example is a law of public transport. I think it has been on the table for a changes like 2.5 years. But I really hope that in near future they will have some disruptive change in the law, so that because there is, I mean, it's too detailed, it is too complex, and if we really try to follow the law, then I would say that innovation will get stuck and die there. So this kind of disruption on the government side has to happen also to enable things to start to change.
So it's also a change in the way we think. I mean, for any person, it seems first a little bit insane to take a taxi from a rural point to another rural point. But then if you compare it to actual big bus that is empty, then you realize that the things that you are doing with mobile mobility actually make a lot of sense. The same is perhaps with autonomous driving. The same is with the way we think about cars. For my grandfather, who's 86, he still drives his car, and for him the car is basically real estate. So the first cars he bought, I think in the 80s or 70s, they were like meant to be for the whole life. Okay, they were Moskvich and Zaporozhets, so they didn't last a lifetime. Luckily, my grandfather outlived them. Now he has like the next cars already, of course, but still the car is like a real estate. The same pretty much for my father's generation. It's still like I own it, it's very important. For me, it's like a monthly cost, and I'm pretty sure that my kids just think how to get from point A to point B. And it's a kind of generational thing as well. It's not so much about ownership. I need to own a car, you know. I need to have this squared pillows on the back roof. It is not that like that anymore for the young generation.
But when we think about e-scooters as an example, then this is a sector, I think, maybe that could use some regulation. So we talked about public transportation and over-regulating it. Do we also see some other sectors inside mobility that could use more regulation?
No, I think the regulation is needed, of course. But I think the question is not how bad that we have so many accidents at the moment with electric scooters, let's just prohibit them. I think the solution is actually that we need to design the roads, we need to separate pedestrians from the electric scooters. Maybe we need to find or design in a city environment more parking space for this kind of scooters where they can charge and where they can properly be parked. But certainly we shouldn't just think that let's prohibit. And then things happen in a positive way. In the same way that if we think of the Bolt and taxi service, it happened also that we found, the government found actually a good regulation format to have this kind of shared economy to evolve. So it goes in this way. So micromobility, it has to be regulated, but not over-regulated and not prohibited. That would be a mistake.
I remember last summer when I came from here to the city center with the Bolt scooter, it slowed down near the river. There was an area where it had to drive like 10 kilometers an hour. So it's actually very easy to regulate them and tell them not to speed. A friend of mine has got this red flag from Bolt Drive because he's speeding all the time with the Bolt Drive, and the Bolt Drive knows that he's speeding, so he gets into trouble from that.
Okay.
And our vehicles, the Auve vehicles, they cannot break the law because they are programmed not to. So in a way, this innovative mobility can be much safer than your traditional like human action. also, of course, I think a lot of problems that are involved with the scooters, and I see a lot of time also myself, people with the scooters on, when I go bicycling, they are speeding, they are like, youngsters are looking at Instagram at the same time and then keeping one hand on the wheel, and obviously this is not safe. But this is not so much perhaps about regulation, but about like how we, like general ethics or how we behave with those. In Paris, for some reason, they throw half of those scooters to the Seine River. I have no idea why they do that, but that's the Parisian way to interact with the scooters. In Tartu, people are much more polite, so that's a good start already.
But you have experiences with getting autonomous vehicles on streets in different countries. So I know that it's very different in Singapore than it is in Estonia. What about regulation there?
Actually, we haven't, clearly, we have chosen not to go to Singapore at this point because we see that it takes at least half a year and a lot of resource to even get to the market. But I believe that once you are there, then Singapore actually has a lot of potential as a target market. And why so? They have, they're, to my knowledge, one of the very, very few countries that has a countrywide strategy to introduce autonomous mobility. And if you think about it, they need to do that. In Estonia, we have a luxury of having 52% of the landmass covered with forest. And we have the only traffic jam right now in Tartu, or the lack of parking spaces, is in front of this building. Everywhere else you can park wherever you want to. But in Paris, in San Francisco, in London, this is not the case. And in Singapore, certainly not the case. So what they have been doing, they have like a land mass of Hiiumaa, 6 million people, and obviously they need something that is not the personal car. One thing that they have done there is that they have made the cars super expensive because of the taxation. I have heard that like Toyota Corolla could easily cost you 100,000 euros there, and not even talking about BMWs, but you also need to offer an alternative. So I think it's actually very smart from the Singapore government to have this autonomous strategy and to really look into the use cases. And secondly, in a way, I think it is good to have a regulation that is enabling but strict. Because especially when we are investing so much time and energy to make our vehicles safe, we don't want to have anyone just coming from the forest and saying, oh, my car is also autonomous, and let them drive. You need to be very, very sure that what you actually can deliver what you say.
Okay, you said that in Singapore it takes 9 months. What about Estonia?
Well, for us, I don't even remember the first drives on public roads, but in practice, we don't have a law expressis verbis saying how this should happen, but we have a very cooperative and very constructive transportation authority. And in practice, we have done a lot of exams, first of all, to show that our vehicle is capable of behaving in crisis situation. That was one part. And until now, we also do basically exams or verifications in every area where we want to operate publicly. For example, the last one being in Tallinn in Mustamäe. So first, we need to invite people from the transport authority, and they kind of certify that, yes, we can safely operate there. And there is still a human safety operator required, which will fade out, I believe, but not completely. It will fade out in this way that one safety operator will take care of more than one car, and that will be enough.
Pirko, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add, yes, in now there is, in Europe level, I think the legislation is harmonizing, and the rules will be quite similar all over the Europe. And I think this is something good, because with autonomous vehicles, I think, as Taavi mentioned, they have been here already more than 8 years, and it has been a long enough time to understand how to put the regulations. So I think the kind of rollout times in every country will harmonize in near future. But if we talk about this kind of new or innovation, it's still it's a very local issue, and it's very much depends on a city. No, we together with Auve we did a pilot in Greece, and it took 9 months to go through the legislation, and even then we ended up that it was quite very heavy security how we could travel there. So yeah, I would say that we will see soon that there will be more and more vehicles. There will be more harmonized legislation around Europe how you can test and drive.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. We have 2 questions, and they are pretty broad questions that require in-depth answers from you. Veiko is asking, most Estonians have summer cottage outside main town, such as Tallinn or Tartu. How to convince a family of 5 persons to use public transportation or a rental car?
It's a really great question. Who wants to take it?
I can answer. We discovered, we discussed it with behind the scenes before that actually to rent a Bolt drive car for a weekend and compare it to monthly payments, it starting to get reasonable already. There is no point to buy a car. And the second thing, I think, to travel with the public transport, that means that the family has more time to talk to each other. So it's a quality time of the travel. And of course, we don't need a free transport traveling once a week into your summer house. We need a proper, normal transport. But still, I know many people who have their own cars at home, but they use public transport because you have more time for yourself.
Okay, good point. You want to add something?
I can say that public transport is ineffective to cover all the needs of the people.
Exactly.
Then this is unreasonable. So that's why there are different mobility, let's say,
Opportunities.
Opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, I have 3 kids. I have a dog, and fitting them all with all the stuff they carry to public transport sometimes and go to point, it might be a logistical nuisance. So in some use cases, cars still remain for the time being default options. But getting rid of the second car for urban commuting, that's definitely possible if we do the things right way. And if you think of use cases like people going to work in such areas like, for example, Ülemiste city. I hope most of us know Ülemiste city. There is like, I think 12 or 15,000 people working there, and more than 40% come with personal cars. So if, like, let's say 5 percentage points of those people come without personal cars, Ülemiste city can allocate these parking lots for, let's say, something more meaningful, build a restaurant, build a terrace, whatever. And these are the people we should be targeting first. Urban commuters, they don't need car for every occasion. And yeah, we are living in luxury in Estonia. We have places to park. Even in Tallinn, you have places to park. But this is not the reality in most big cities in the world.
Okay.
And our second question, we now have one more question. Oscar is asking, it's a very dramatic question. Seems that we have at least 3 political parties that aren't interested in promoting micromobility solutions because their electors don't like them. Are we doomed?
Who are these
Political
parties?
question.
I have no idea.
He doesn't specify, so it's anyone's guess, really.
No, I before mentioned that it is clear that we need more regulation and clear division between vehicles which are driving 25 kilometers and pedestrians. But I think the Social Democrats were even trying to prohibit in some way. But anyways, I think the common sense will win, and we just need a dedicated and well-designed infrastructure, and we have less accidents, certainly.
Because I don't want to be so dramatic, I'll ask just another question. When does a citizen will have supporting grants for micromobility? Asks Yuli. supporting grants for micromobility?
I don't like grants. I mean, I like market economy. We don't have grants for buying a car or a second car. And we still spend so much on these cars. I think we need better services, and then we have a fair price. This supporting or a grant, that means we need to take as a tax it from one person and allocate to another. And I'm more on market economy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree with that as well. And also the conditions. I mean, how I see public sector is enabling innovation, and innovation will come and will provide most of the great. I mean, public sector innovation is also like definitely there, and in Estonia we see it in many places. But private, if you enable private sector, they will bring innovative solutions. And regarding this political topic, as an ex-politician, I would just say that if you address this topic through climate change and sustainability, then perhaps those parties actually would answer differently, because essentially urban commuting with gasoline cars is a threat for the climate. And if we find the more sustainable alternatives, well, I think in Scandinavian countries it would be almost illegal to be against anything that is addressing climate change. In Estonia we are not there yet perhaps, but eventually I think it will go there as well, and sustainability will become a bigger issue for politicians.
One last question from Marisa. What opportunities do startups have to get in touch with the right people in the government to enable test beds or pilot projects?
There is a program called Accelerate Estonia. Probably you can find people running this program also here. And I think Indrek Gailan's email address is public, so...
He's the right guy.
Pretty sure it's at mkm.ee.
Okay. Very quick final question to each of you. Are you ready to give up your family car in 10 years from now? No private car per family.
I think it is very black and white. Probably we have a family car in our family, but the question is how much I'm using it. Probably I will use it visiting my summer cottage, but for a daily commuting, I don't use it already, not today, so...
But you can use Bolt Drive, as you said.
Yes, might be that I will use Bolt Drive and I will not buy a next car. I don't know yet.
Okay. Indrek?
I think it will be reduced to 1. That's a fact, but can I reduce it to 0? That's a maybe.
Okay. Taavi?
Well, my oldest kid will be 23 and youngest will be 13, so it's quite likely that at least 2 of my kids don't want to travel with me all the time anymore. So it makes it much more likely that I can give up at least one of the cars in the family. If 2, I'm not also fully convinced, but I'm very convinced that all of us will have electric cars, and that will pose opportunities, but also challenges for the charging network. But that's, of course, a topic of another panel soon.
Okay, but thank you. Our time is up. Thank you for listening. And to the panelists.
Thank you, Maarja.